A young mom went out for her usual morning run, but never made it back home. Police quickly launched a massive search, and within hours, they uncovered a string of disturbing clues. But what started as a local investigation soon made headlines across the country because no one was prepared for what this case would turn into. Eliza Fletcher was born on November 9, 1987, in Memphis, Tennessee. Her family was well known in the area. Her grandfather owned a private hardware supply company worth over $3 billion. They were known not just for their money, but for giving back, always supporting local charities and making a real impact in the community. Even though Eliza was set to inherit the family business someday, she had other plans. She wanted to be a teacher. She finished a private high school, went on to the University of Memphis, and eventually got her master's in education. And she wasn't just book smart. Eliza was also a gifted athlete. She played on her university's soccer team, loved running, and took part in marathons whenever she could. Once she graduated, she got a job as a preschool teacher, and from day one, it was clear she was made for it. Eliza had a natural connection with kids, and they absolutely adored her. She was also deeply involved in her church. During one of the services, she met a man named Richard. The two began dating, eventually got married, and went on to have 2 sons together. Ever since then, Eliza had been focused on raising her kids and doing the job she loved at the preschool. She and her husband were also big fans of the outdoors. Any chance they got, they'd head out on a hike, go camping, or take off on a road trip with the family. Eliza also stayed super dedicated to her fitness routine. She went for a run almost every single morning, and true crime podcasts were always playing in her earbuds. She pretty much never hit the pavement without one. In 2022, when she was 34, Eliza was in the middle of training for the Boston Marathon. She'd been running even more than usual, and to fit it all in, she started going out around 4 a.m. That way, she could get her run in and still be home in time to have breakfast with her family before heading to work. On the morning of September 2nd, Eliza got up before sunrise and headed out for her usual run. She lived near the University of Memphis and loved running along the campus. Her typical route was about 4 miles out and back, roughly an hour round trip. But that morning, something felt off. When her husband woke up and realized Eliza still wasn't home, he texted her a few times, but got no reply. Then he started calling, but she didn't pick up. That was completely out of character for Eliza. She was supposed to work the early shift that day, and she took her job very seriously. So, Richard decided not to wait any longer and called the police around 7 a.m. Detectives jumped into action right away. Based on what they knew at that point, it didn't look like Eliza had just gone off somewhere on her own. According to her husband, she only took a water bottle and her phone with her, so it wasn't like she had plans to go anywhere after the run. Since Eliza usually ran near the university, police reached out to the school's administration and asked them to alert students, just in case there was someone dangerous in the area. Given how well known Eliza's family was in Memphis, news of her disappearance spread fast. Local media jumped on the story almost immediately, and within hours, theories started circulating around the city. One of the most common was that her husband might have been involved, since in cases like this, the spouse is often the first person people look at. Viewers watched his interviews closely, trying to figure out if there was something off about his behavior. But from the very beginning, police had no reason to suspect Richard. Everything pointed to him being at home when Eliza left for her run. Officers were sent out to canvass the area, while detectives started collecting surveillance footage along Eliza's usual route. And pretty soon, they spotted her. Running just like always, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then they got to one particular camera, positioned just a short distance from the university, and what they saw was chilling. At 4:20 a.m., Eliza ran past a parked SUV. A few seconds later, a man jumped out and ran after her. There was a brief struggle, and then he forced her into the vehicle. The car stayed there for another 4 minutes before driving off, with Eliza inside. Now that investigators knew they were dealing with a kidnapping, the case kicked into high gear. More resources were brought in, and the priority was clear: find Eliza alive. The suspect had been caught on camera, but the footage was grainy and didn't give them much to work with. Same with the license plate. It was too blurry to read. Still, detectives did notice something interesting. Reviewing footage from other cameras, they saw the same SUV drive past Eliza just minutes before the abduction. Even earlier, about 20 minutes before it happened, the car had been circling the area near the university. It looked like the driver was deliberately hunting for someone. Once he spotted Eliza, he parked up ahead and waited for her to run past. Police shared the footage with local media, hoping someone might recognize the man. They also managed to identify the make and model of the SUV and noted that it had a busted taillight. But even with that detail, tracking the suspect down wasn't going to be easy. Meanwhile, police got a new lead. That same morning, someone had found a water bottle and a cell phone lying by the side of the road, roughly 7 miles from where Eliza was taken. The person handed them over to police, but it took a few hours to confirm they were connected to her disappearance. With help from her family, detectives verified that the phone belonged to Eliza. It looked like the kidnapper had tossed it out the window while driving. But that wasn't all. Right next to the phone and bottle, investigators found something else: a pair of men's flip-flops. Police were almost certain they'd been dumped along with the other items, which was odd. Why would the suspect throw away his own footwear? One theory was that the sandals might have been stained with blood, and he was trying to get rid of the evidence. But that also meant one thing: if he'd been wearing them barefoot, they could contain traces of his DNA. The flip-flops were rushed to the lab for testing, while officers kept combing the area. Thanks to this discovery, detectives had a better idea of the route the suspect might have taken, and focused their search along that path. But it didn't lead anywhere. That went on for several more hours, until detectives finally got a call from the lab. Forensic experts had managed to pull a DNA profile of the flip-flops, and it came back with a hit in the FBI's database. The sample matched a 38-year-old man named Cleotha Abston. As you might have guessed, the fact that his DNA was in the system meant he had some serious criminal record. But more on that in a bit. For now, detectives had a name, and they immediately shifted focus to tracking him down. The next day, Saturday, officers spotted Cleotha's car on the road. He tried to get away and even managed to lose them for a short time, running into an apartment where his brother lived. But police quickly caught up with him, and Cleotha was taken into custody. Cleotha was brought in for questioning right away, but he denied everything. He claimed he had nothing to do with the abduction and said he didn't even understand why he'd been arrested. While detectives kept trying to get him to talk, officers spoke with his brother, and what he shared raised a few eyebrows. He said that on the morning of the abduction, Cleotha had come over, tossed some clothes into the laundry, and started scrubbing down his car like his life depended on it, which was pretty weird. Detectives got a warrant to search both Cleotha's car and his brother's apartment, hoping to uncover something useful. The apartment didn't turn up anything related to the case, but police did arrest the brother anyway after finding illegal weapons and drugs inside. As for the car, forensic techs found traces of blood, and testing confirmed it belonged to Eliza. But even then, Cleotha stuck to his story. He kept claiming he was innocent and refused to say what had happened to her. So once again, detectives were left with more questions than answers. They still held out hope that Eliza might be found alive, but with each passing hour, that hope was slipping further and further away. The search continued through Monday, until later that evening, when detectives got a call from one of the search teams. A woman's body had been found in a patch of tall grass on an abandoned property, just a few hundred yards from where Eliza's phone had been recovered. Investigators were almost certain it was her, but they had to wait until the next day for official confirmation before making an announcement. The medical examiner later confirmed that the victim had multiple scrapes and abrasions, and the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. Her shorts were missing when the body was found, though police later discovered them in a nearby trash bin. Still, investigators didn't publicly confirm whether there had been a sexual assault. Even though Cleotha continued to deny everything, the evidence was overwhelming, and eventually he was officially charged with first-degree murder. Given how closely the public had followed the case and how widely it was covered in the media, the confirmation of Eliza's death sparked a wave of anger and heartbreak across Memphis. But what came next turned that outrage into full-on fury, because details of Cleotha's criminal past had just come to light. He first came to the attention of police when he was just 11 years old. That's when he was sent to juvenile detention for robbery. But that was only the beginning. Between the ages of 11 and 16, Cleotha was arrested 16 more times for everything from petty theft to illegal gun possession, assault, and gang activity. At 16, he ended up behind bars again, this time for sexually assaulting a man. He served 6 months in juvenile detention, then was released into his mother's custody. But just 2 weeks later, he was arrested yet again. That time, he kidnapped a well-known attorney at gunpoint. He forced the man into his car and drove around looking for an ATM. When he took him out to withdraw money, the attorney started yelling for help, and Cleotha was arrested. Even though he was just 16, the court tried him as an adult and sentenced him to 24 years in prison. He served 20 of those years before being granted early release in November 2020. And that meant if he'd served his full sentence, he never would have had the chance to go after Eliza or anyone else. When Cleotha's case hit the news, a woman named Eliza came forward, and what she revealed sparked a massive outrage at law enforcement. She said she met Cleotha in the summer of 2021 through a dating app, and after a few weeks of chatting, he asked her out. That night, he told her to pick him up and gave her an address. When she arrived, Cleotha invited her to come inside. But the moment Eliza stepped into the building, she realized something was off. The place was completely abandoned. There was no way he actually lived there. And later, it turned out this was the same abandoned property where Eliza's body would be found. Once they were inside, Cleotha pulled a gun and forced Eliza back into her car, where he sexually assaulted her. At the time, she was 4 months pregnant, and she told him that, hoping that it might stop him. But it didn't. After the assault, Cleotha walked away, and Eliza drove herself to the hospital and reported everything to the police. Forensics collected DNA evidence, and she gave investigators his dating profile, which included his name, photo, and phone number. At this point, you're probably asking the obvious question. If this assault happened over a year before Eliza's abduction, and police had everything they needed to arrest Cleotha, then why was he still walking free? The answer was as simple as it was infuriating. Police just didn't get around to finishing the case. Even though they had his DNA, his name, photo, and phone number, they didn't file the report in time. In fact, the DNA sample they collected from Eliza's case wasn't even uploaded to the FBI's database until after Eliza was murdered. When public outrage exploded, the police department responded by saying they were simply short-staffed, so they just never got to it. So really, the system failed Eliza not once, but twice. First, by letting Cleotha out of prison 4 years early, and second, by ignoring a case that could have put him back behind bars long before he had the chance to hurt anyone else. Desperate for justice, Eliza had even filed a lawsuit against the city, but it was thrown out. Only after Eliza's murder did Cleotha finally face charges for this crime. But by that point, none of it really mattered, because Cleotha was already behind bars, and prosecutors had made it clear they'd be seeking the death penalty. Still, Cleotha continued to deny everything, and surprisingly, his entire family stood by him. His mother even told reporters that she believed her son was innocent because he told her he didn't kill anyone. She also described him as a kind and good-hearted person. But the truth was, Eliza wasn't even his last victim. Just 1 day before her murder, Cleotha, who worked for a cleaning service, showed up for a shift at a movie theater. That evening, another employee realized 2 of her credit cards were missing, and someone had already started using them. When she checked the surveillance footage, she saw Cleotha stealing her cards. And here's the detail that really stood out. On that footage, he was wearing the same sandals he later ditched alongside Eliza's phone and water bottle. Unfortunately, the woman didn't get the chance to report the theft in time, so those charges were only added to his growing list after Eliza was murdered. In the end, Cleotha was sent to prison to await multiple trials. The first was for the assault on Eliza, and in May 2024, he was sentenced to 80 years behind bars. Then came the trial for Eliza's murder. Prosecutors were still pushing for the death penalty, but eventually, Cleotha was offered a plea deal, plead guilty in exchange for life in prison with no chance of parole. After some consideration, he took the deal, and in October 2024, he was officially sentenced, guaranteeing he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. So yes, he avoided execution, but at least now, he'll never have another chance to hurt anyone again. This case ended up being yet another example of how the justice system, through early release and years of inaction, allowed a violent man to walk free and keep committing crimes, even though there were plenty of red flags that should have kept him behind bars. In Eliza's memory, thousands of people came together to run the same route where she was taken, finishing the run she never got to complete. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.